father had two sons. The elder was clever and sensible, but the younger was dozy. And when people saw him, they said, he'll give his father some trouble. When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it. But if his father asked him to fetch anything when it was late, or in the night time, and the way led through the churchyard, he'd say, "Dad, no, not there, it makes me shudder," as he was afraid. Or when stories were told by the fire at night which made the flesh creep, the listeners sometimes said, "Oh, it makes us shudder." The younger sat in a corner and listened with the rest of them and couldn't imagine what they were on about. "They're always saying it makes me shudder, it makes me shudder. It doesn't make me shudder," thought he. "That must be something else that's beyond me." And since he didn't understand fear, neither could he feel it. Now one day his dad said to him, "Listen to me, youngster, it's about time you got a job." "Well, Dad," he replied, "I'm willing to learn something, if it could be managed, I'd like to learn how to shudder. It's completely beyond me at the moment." The elder brother smiled when he heard that and thought to himself, God love him, he'll never be good for anything as long as he lives. The father sighed and said, "In this life you'll soon learn how to shudder, but you'll not earn your living by it." Soon after this, the local councillor came to the house on a visit, and the father told her his trouble. "Just think," said he, "when I asked him how he was going to earn his keep, he actually wanted to learn how to shudder." "If that's all," replied the councillor, "he can learn that with me. Send him over to me, and I'll soon sort him out." The father was much obliged and thought, it'll be good for him. The councillor took him into her house and had him ring the town bell. After a day or two, the councillor woke him at midnight and told him to get up and go to the old tower and ring the bell. "You'll soon learn what shuddering is," thought she, and covered herself in a sheet and secretly went there before him. And when the lad was at the top of the tower and turned round and was just going to take hold of the bell rope, he saw a white figure standing on the stairs opposite the sounding hole. "Who's there?" he cried, but there was no reply. "Answer," cried the boy, "or take yourself off, you've no business here at night." The councillor, however, remained motionless. The boy called a second time. "What do you want? Speak up or I'll throw you down the steps." The councillor thought, this has got him spooked, and stood as still as stone. Then the boy called a third time. Still nothing, so he put his shoulder down and charged. Then he rang the bell, went home to bed, and fell asleep. The councillor's wife waited a long time, but she didn't come back. Eventually, she became uneasy and wakened the boy and asked, "Do you know where she is? She climbed up the tower before you did." "No, I don't know," replied the boy. "But someone was standing by the sounding hole on the other side of the steps, and as they didn't answer or go away, I took them for a scoundrel and threw them downstairs. Have a look and see if it's her. I'll be sorry if it is." The woman ran away and found the councillor lying, moaning in the corner with a broken leg. The father was vexed, and was greatly vexed when he saw the councillor. "Is there any hope for him?" he said. "Well," said the councillor, "the wise learn quickly, but if I'm honest, your lad's going to struggle." After this, the father despaired and told the boy he had to go. "Look, Dad, I know how you feel right now, but I'm going to learn how to shudder, and then at least I'll have one skill to support me. Look, lad, here's some cash. Get yourself off and make the best of things you can, but don't come back until you've straightened yourself out," his father said. The next morning, the boy put his cash into his pocket and went forth on the great highway. And said to himself, if only I could shudder, if only I could shudder. Then a man who heard him approached, and when they'd walked a little farther to where they could see a gallows, the man said to him, look, there's a tree where 7 men have just been hung. Sit down under it and wait till night comes, and you'll soon learn how to shudder. This should be a piece of cake, thought the lad. Then he sat down beneath it and waited till evening came. As he was cold, he lit himself a fire, but at midnight the wind blew so sharply that in spite of his fire he couldn't get warm. The wind knocked the hanged men against each other, and they moved backwards and forwards. The boy thought to himself, if I'm cold, them fellas must be freezing. And so he brought down all 7. Then he stoked the fire, blew it, and set them all round it to warm themselves. They sat there and didn't stir. And then their clothes caught fire. So he said, take care, or I'll have to hang you up again. The dead men didn't hear, were quite silent, and let their rags go on burning. At this, he lost his temper and said, if you won't take care, I can't help you. I'll not be burnt with you. And he hung them all up again. And he sat down by his fire and fell asleep. And the next morning, the man came to him and said, well, do you know how to shudder? No, answered the lad, how should I know? Those chaps up there didn't open their mouths, and they were so stupid that they let their clothes get burnt. Then the man saw that he'd get no change out of the boy and went away, shaking his head sadly. The youth, likewise, went his way. And once more began to mutter to himself, oh, if only I could shudder, if only I could shudder. A waggoner, who was striding behind him, heard this and asked, what is it that you're always muttering? Oh, replied the youth, I do so wish I could shudder, but no one can teach me how. Enough of your foolish chatter, said the waggoner. Come with me, lad, I'll see about a place for you. In the evening, they arrived at an inn where they planned to spend the night. The waggoner told the host his dilemma, and he laughed and said, if that's what you want, there should be a good opportunity for you here. Oh, shush, said the hostess. So many reckless people have already died. It would be a shame. So beautiful eyes as these should never see the daylight again. But the youth said, but this is exactly why I'm on my journey. He let the host have no peace until he'd heard the full story. Not far away was a king's castle plagued with spirits. To clear them out, someone must keep watch for 3 nights, and the king had promised that whoever managed it could marry his daughter, and she was a Bobby Dazzler from a wealthy family. Already many men had tried, but all had failed. Next morning, the youth was straight round to the king and said, if you'll let me, I'll willingly watch 3 nights in the haunted castle. The king looked at him, sighed, and deduced immediately he wasn't the sharpest tool in the box. But he thought, why not? Where there's no sense, there's no feeling. So he said, you can ask for 3 things to take into the castle with you, but they can't be living things. Then he answered, right then, I'll have a fire, a lathe with a knife, and a workbench. The king had these things carried into the castle for him during the day. As night came on, the youth went up and made himself a fire in one of the rooms, placed a bench and knife beside it, and seated himself by the lathe. Towards midnight, he was about to poke his fire, and, as he was blowing it, something cried suddenly from one corner. "Meow! How cold we are!" "Oi!" cried he. "What are you crying about? If you're cold, come and take a seat by the fire and warm yourselves." And when he'd said that, 2 great, supernatural black cats came with one tremendous leap and crouched on either side of him and looked savagely at him with their fiery eyes. When they'd warmed themselves, they said in spectral voices, "Boy, shall we have a game of cards?" "Why not?" he replied, "but just show me your paws." Then they stretched out their claws. "I'm taking no chances with you, pair. Those long nails will have to be cut." Then he seized them by the scruff of the necks and fixed them to the bench. "On second thoughts, I've lost my appetite for cards," he said, and out of an abundance of caution, he threw them from the window into the moat below. But when he dealt with those 2, and was about to sit down again, out from every hole and corner came more supernatural creatures in the form of black cats and dogs with red-hot chains, and more of them came until he couldn't move, and they howled horribly, enough to terrify a more worldly youth, and got on his fire, pulled it apart, and tried to put it out. He watched for a while, quietly, but at last, when they'd gone too far, he seized his knife and set about them. Some ran away, others he killed and threw out into the moat. When he came back, he rekindled the fire again and warmed himself. And so he sat until he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer and he needed to sleep. Then he looked round and saw a bed in the corner. "Just what I need," he said, and got in. Just as he was dropping off, however, the bed began to move under its own steam and careered around the castle. "Woo! Faster, faster!" he cried, and faster it went, but suddenly, with a violent roll, turned upside down and lay on him like a mountain. But, with noticeable lack of dignity, and in a great confusion of arms and legs and tangled bedding, he emerged from under and dusted himself down and said, "Someone else can sleep in that," lay down by his fire, and slept a great, open-mouthed, snory sleep until the sun came up. In the morning, the king came, and when he saw him lying there on the ground, he thought, with little surprise, the evil spirits had killed him and he was dead. "Shame, he was a good-looking lad," he said. The youth heard him, got up and said, "It's not that bad yet." You could have knocked the king down with a feather, but he was chuffed, and asked how he got on. "Not too bad," he said. "1 night down, 2 to go, should be fine." The second night, he went up again into the old castle, sat down by the fire, and once more began his old song. "Oh, I wish I could shudder." When midnight came, an uproar and noise of tumbling was heard. At first it was low, but it grew louder and louder. Then, with a blood-curdling scream, half a man came down the chimney. "Hey up!" cried the boy. "Where's the rest of you?" Then the uproar began again. There was a roaring and howling, and the other half fell down. "Hang on, mate," said he. "I'll just stoke up the fire a bit for you." When he looked round again, the 2 pieces were joined together, and a hideous man was sitting in his seat. "Oi!" said the youth, "that's my place." And, after a brief struggle, he shifted the horrible chap. Then more men fell down, one after the other, and brought 9 dead men's legs and 2 skulls, and set them up and played bowls with them. The youth also wanted to play and said, "Listen, you lot, can I join in?"
"Yes, if you have money,
came the ghostly reply. Money enough, replied the lad, but those balls are not round enough. Then he took the skulls and put them in the lathe and turned them till they were round. There, now they'll roll better, said he. Now we'll have some fun. He played with them until midnight, lost some of his money, but on the stroke of 12, everything vanished. He lay down and quietly fell asleep. Next morning, the king came to inquire after him. How did he get on this time? Asked he. I've been playing at ninepins, he answered, and I've lost a couple of quid, if I'm being honest. Not shuddered then. I've had a great time. They seem like decent chaps. The third night, he sat down again on his bench and said quite sadly, if only I could shudder. When it grew late, 6 tall men came in with a coffin. They placed the coffin on the ground. He went to it and took the lid off, and sure enough, there was a dead man inside. He felt his face, but it was as cold as ice. Hang on, he said, I'll warm you up a bit, and dragged the coffin closer to the fire. But he remained cold. Then he took him out, sat him up by the fire, and rubbed his arms so that the blood might circulate again. After a short time, the dead man became warm and began to move. Then the youth said, there you go, chap, you're back on your feet. The dead man, however, got up and cried, I'll kill you. What? Said he. That's all the thanks I get. Back in your coffin again. And he took him up, threw him in, and shut the lid. Then the 6 men came and carried him away again. Still no shudder, said he. I'll never learn it here as long as I live. Then a man entered who was taller than all the others and looked terrible. He was old and had a long white beard. The old man led him back into the castle, and in a cellar showed him 3 chests full of gold. Of these, said he,
one part is for the poor, the other for the king, the third yours.
In the meantime, it struck 12, and the spirit disappeared, so that the youth stood in black darkness. No worries, I can still find my way out, said he, and by feeling the walls along the way, he returned to the room and slept there by his fire. Next morning, the king came, heard his story and said, Holy smoke, kid, now you must have learnt what shuddering is. No, still no idea, he said. Well, said the king, you've saved the castle and no mistake, and as long as she's amenable, you shall marry my daughter. The daughter consented as, lovely as she was as daft as the boy, and they were well suited. Then the gold was brought up and the wedding celebrated. But however much the young king loved his wife and however happy they were, he still always went on about shuddering, and eventually she was sick of hearing about it. Her maid, who was by far the smartest member of the outfit, said, I'll sort him out once and for all. She went out to the stream that flowed through the garden, got a bucket of water, but with half a dozen gudgeon who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that night, when the young king was sleeping, his wife pulled back the bedding and emptied the full bucket of cold water with the gudgeons all over him. Then he woke up in a splutter and a splash and he cried, That's so cold! Look at me shaking! Now I know what it is to shudder.